Hello YouTube chess lovers and my friends, this is Gunjan here. Welcome to the 10th episode of Dirty Chess Tricks Against Sicilian. In this episode, I'm going to show you some of the high profile tricks in the closed Sicilian from the white perspective. The opening arises after the following order, that is e4, c5, and now white continues with the move knight to c3. The main line of the closed Sicilian goes as follows: knight to c6, g3, g6, bishop to g2, bishop to g7, d3, d6, and here I am going to concentrate on the two moves, that is bishop to e3 and knight to h3. First of all, let's consider the absolutely main line which continue from here onwards: bishop to e3, e6, queen to d2, and now here black has two good choices. Probably knight g to e7 is a more accurate choice, but the most popular choice from here is rook to b8, and after the theoretical move knight to f3, black has tried this most popular choice, knight to d4. And surprisingly enough, this is what the theory suggests. And if you check this position in online database, even you will find out that knight to d4 has been played highest in this position. But can you believe this move is a big time blunder? Yes, indeed. And the modern engine confirms this with a pretty accurate sequence. So this is a big time trick you should remember if you are playing closed Sicilian. And even if you are not playing closed Sicilian, in the tournament, if you find out that your opponent is following this main line, then you should certainly give a shot to finish him quickly. The refutation goes as follows: bishop captures d4. Here it doesn't matter that whether your opponent take with the bishop or the pawn. If you take with the bishop, then knight captures d4 and the same line will be goes. So the most accurate response here is pawn captures d4. Afterwards, white will continue with the move knight to b5. So attacking two spots. So black response is force. Black has to play queen to b6 to defend both the threat. And now white keep pressurizing the d6 square with queen to b4. Again, black response is force. Black has to play king to d7, because if he continue with the move bishop to f8, then after the following continuation, that is queen captures d4, queen captures d4, and knight captures d4, not only every single black pieces are at this original position, but on top of everything, black is a clear pawn down. So this is straight away a winning advantage for the white. Okay, so the forced reply is king to d7, and now white has this amazing shot in this position, that is e5. So the renewing threat of capturing the d6 pawn, and this position is not easy to play as a black. For example, the only accurate response here is d captures e5, but after the move knight to d2, just on the 13th move of the game, black has completely lost position. I got this position against a 2100 rated player in online rapid game, where my opponent continued with the move a5. Now instead of a5, if your opponent continue here with the move a6, then this is a big time disaster, because after knight to c4 attacking the queen, queen captures b5, and after queen to d6 check, king to e8, and queen captures b8. Not only white emerged with an extra exchange, but still black is going to face a long-term difficulties. The first obvious threat here is knight to d6 nabbing the queen, and it doesn't matter whether black moves the queen or moves the king. Let's say, as per the engine, the most accurate response is queen to c5 defending the c8, but now comes knight to d6. And that is a monster knight, because not only it's attacking the c8, but it is also looking at the f7 square, and on top of everything, black has a check to face. So the obvious response is king to d7. Afterwards, knight to f7 naps another rook and exchange and infect the game. So considering all this disaster in the game, my opponent continued with the move a5, attacking my queen. I responded with queen to a4, so trying to get a discover attack. My opponent responded with king to d8. The beauty about this position is black king is stuck in the center, so that gives all the fun to the white camp. And to illustrate my point, how quickly white get winning position, let's see few moves. Knight to c4, attacking the queen. Queen to a6. Queen to a3. So black doesn't have time to capture this knight, because after queen check, black is going to lose the rook in the corner. So in the game, my opponent decided to continue with the move bishop to d7, blocking the check and attacking the knight. I responded with knight b to d6, so looking at the f7 for the fork. So my opponent defended with knight to h6, but after knight captures a5, so there is x-ray on queen with knight check and then nabbing the queen. So my opponent defended with rook to e8, but after knight captures b7 check, king to c7, queen to c5 check, king to b8, and castle on the king side. I think this is a hopeless position for the black, as many white pieces are surrounding on the black king and black camp is completely miscoordinated. You can check out the rest of the game in the PGN, which is available in the description. The second trick I'm about to show you is very effective against a player who plays Botvinnik system against closed Sicilian. So against Botvinnik structure, my recommendation is white should continue with the move knight to h3, and the black opening move order goes as follows: e5, castle on the king side, knight g to e7, and now the standard move f4. Once again, we reach to a very critical position where I think the most accurate choice for the black is to play knight to d4. But as happened in this many closed Sicilian lines, theory are not accurate, and once again, if you check the online database, you will find out that in this position, the most frequent choice from the black is to play castle on the king side, which is again leads to some very much tricky play by the white. So let's see what's wrong with this natural looking move castle on the king side. Well, after that, white has this amazing move f5. If black doesn't take this pawn, then after g4, white attack will roll down on the king side. So the obvious move need to be considered: what happens if black accept our pawn sacrifice. G captures f5, pawn captures f5, and now here black has two choices how to capture the f5 pawn. Amongst them, knight captures f5 is the worst of all, because after the following sequence, that is queen to h5 attacking the knight, knight to d4 defending as well as attacking on c2, bishop to e4 once again hitting the knight. So black response is forced. Black has to defend this knight, and the most natural way to defend this is to play queen to f6. And now white simply increase the pressure with knight to d5 attacking the queen, queen to g6, and the star move in this position is queen to d1. This position has so many threats from the white side. The first obvious threat is knight to e7 and nabbing the queen, as this knight is completely pinned. If rook to e8, then white can even consider the move knight to c7 and nabbing the exchange. And the third problem, that let's say if black defend the e7 square with the move bishop to f6, then there comes c3, destroying the one of the defender of the f5 knight, knight to c6, and now the very simple queen to f3, and there is no way black is going to save the piece and infect the game. So considering this option, bishop captures f5 is a most accurate choice by the black. And at first sight it looks like black has won a pawn for nothing. But here comes the nasty idea by white, and that is boom. So sacrificing the whole exchange just within 11 moves of the game. Okay, black response is force, knight captures f5. And now if you check out this position, right now white has a bishop for rook and a pawn, which is obviously not a good trade. But white's big idea is straight away going for the king side attack with the move bishop to e4. Now this knight is attacked, and accordingly there are 4 good choices from the black. If either of the knight comes to the d4, let's say knight f captures d4, then the simplest is you continue with the move queen to h5 attacking the pawn, f5 defending on h7, but after the following continuation, that is bishop check, king to h8 and knight to g5, I think there is no stopping on h7. If h6, then queen to g6, and h7 is still threatened with the mate. And if black take this knight, then after queen check, black king is going to be checkmate in 2 moves. Bishop h6 and queen h6 is a mate. The second move, if the c knight goes to the d4, then scenario won't change, because after queen to h5, if queen to d7, then g4 is a very strong reply. So accordingly, the most nature looking move is queen to f6, guarding on f5. But we already know from the previous variation that whenever the queen f6 happen, then we can instantly play knight to d5, attacking the queen. And after queen to g6 and queen to d1, the same problem as we seen on the knight captures f5, black is going to lose a piece. A simple line can run like this: bishop f6, c3, knight to e6, and now g4, and that knight is going to be lost. If black defend with knight e to g7, then after king to h1, unpinning the g4 pawn and in fact winning the whole piece. So it is very obvious here that if black try to hold on to that knight, then he get the lost position in the opening. So there are 2 good way black can respond in this position. Amongst them, the number one is knight to h4. So trying to give a piece back where white pawn structure will be completely destroyed. But of course, we are not going to take with the g pawn in this position, but rather white will continue with the move queen to h5. So attacking the h7, attacking the knight. So black response is force. Black has to play knight to g6, defending both the threat. But now comes bishop to d5. So idea is once again to play knight to g5 and hitting on h7. So black needs to stop all this with knight c to e7. But after the following sequence, that is knight to g5, h6, and now knight g to e4, I think black position is not a pretty sight. I got this position against a 2000 rated opponent, where my opponent continued with the move king to h7. I responded with bishop to d2. So my simple idea is join as many as pieces in the attack and create some nasty problems in the black camp. My opponent responded here with knight captures d5. I take the knight, and now he played the move f5, which I think is a somewhat inaccurate, because after knight check, king to g8 and knight to e6, it is already a very hard position to play as a black. Not only his g6 knight is attacked, but white is forking queen and the rook. In the game, after some thinking, my opponent continued with queen to e8, defending the knight. But after the following sequence, that is knight captures g7, king captures g7, bishop to h6, king to g8, bishop captures f8, black has to forcefully capture with the king. But the sting in the tail, after few checks, let's say queen check, king f7, queen h7 check, king f8, and the final blow, knight to c7, and white wins the piece in a broad daylight. Last but not least, what happens if your opponent continues with the move knight captures g3? Well, here white doesn't have any choice. White has to take this piece, and now black's idea is to continue with the move f5 and arguing that white has a weak king on the g1 compared to his black king. Well, it's not the case here, because after bishop to g2, white get two minor pieces for a rook and a 2-pawn, and in this situation is specifically very good. Now, to illustrate the danger in this position in the black camp, I like to show you one of my rapid game against a title player where my opponent continued with the move queen to e8. So his idea is to immediately concentrate on my king side. No matter, I continue with the move knight to d5, looking at the c7. He played queen to g6, attacking on g3. I responded with bishop to g5. And after h6 and bishop to h4, he just double up on the f file with rook to f7. Okay, white continue with the move c3. So stopping any knight intrusion, my opponent indeed double up with the move rook to f8. And now very strong move king to h2. And it's very funny here that even though black has some aggressive looking piece looking on the king side, in fact it turns out that black is in a complete zugzwang. This knight cannot move because knight to e7 will happen. None of the major pieces are going anywhere, and the most important feature in this position is black doesn't have any pawn breaks or walking, and on top of everything white has a simple threat, that is bishop to f3 and bishop to h4, and whenever this happens, black position will be completely collapsing. Here my opponent responded with king to h8. I played the obvious move bishop to f3, and now the queen goes on a very funny square, queen to h7. Okay, bishop to h5 happens anyways. He continued with the move rook to d7, but after queen to f3, it is very clear that it is only white who has a good initiative here. My opponent desperately want to open up the game, so he continued with the move e4, but after queen to e2, knight to e5, pawn captures, and the move knight h to f4, black is in a very difficult situation. He tried c4 to get some counterplay, but after knight to e7, after a long thought, my opponent decided to resign, as knight g6 is coming with some deadly threat, and he's about to lose his e4 pawn with a completely lost position. Well, I hope you enjoy and learn these wonderful high-profile tricks in the closed Sicilian from the white perspective. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment on my video, and I'll meet you in my next episode very soon. Bye and take care.